In 1999, in a small town in Montana, a strange disappearance occurred that remains unsolved to this day. Raymond Hall was a 34-year-old man, known to be a responsible person and a loving father. He lived with his wife and young daughter, worked as a truck driver, and often took long-haul trips but always came back on time. One evening, Raymond left for a routine route that was supposed to take less than a day. But when he didn't return the next day, his wife began to worry. She contacted his employers, but they hadn't heard from him either. According to their information, his truck had left the yard, but there were no signs of Raymond or his vehicle anywhere. The police began searching, and for several days they scoured his route, but there were no clues or leads to be found. A week after Raymond disappeared, his wife was jolted awake in the middle of the night by the ringing of their landline phone. When she answered, she heard a man's voice, one she thought she recognized. The caller spoke softly and seemed anxious. She's certain it was Raymond, though the line was breaking up. The only thing she clearly understood were a few short phrases, which sounded like a plea for help and a description of a dark room. The call suddenly cut off, and despite their efforts, the police couldn't trace where it had come from. Oddly, when they checked, there was no record of the call from the phone company. After that, all contact with Raymond stopped. The police investigated every possible lead, but no one had seen him, and his body was never found. The story of Raymond Hall's disappearance became one of the most unsettling mysteries in that part of the state. Years later, his wife claimed she continued to get calls late at night, but each time, there was only silence on the other end, or just faint breaths. Many believe Raymond was the victim of a crime, but it remains unclear how it happened or what became of him. In 1988, a small-town high school in Oregon was rocked by the sudden disappearance of a student named Lisa Montgomery. She was 17, quiet, a good student, and didn't socialize much outside of school. Most people knew her as shy, polite, and someone who kept to herself. She was last seen by classmates on a regular Tuesday afternoon, heading to her car after school. When Lisa didn't come home that night, her family became worried and called the police. They found her car parked in the school lot, but her purse and other belongings were missing. Search parties combed the area, and friends were questioned, but no one knew where she could have gone. The most unsettling part? A classmate named Evan claimed he had seen her after she was supposed to have left, walking into the woods just beyond the school grounds. Evan described Lisa as looking out of it and claimed she didn't respond when he called her name. He said it seemed like she was in a trance, just walking deeper into the trees. But despite this eerie lead, the police found no evidence of her there. Months passed with no new information, until one spring evening when Evan's parents reported him missing as well. Friends remembered Evan acting strangely in the days leading up to his disappearance, talking about dreams where he saw Lisa standing in the woods, her face pale, beckoning him to follow her. The police searched for Evan just as they had for Lisa, but he, too, vanished without a trace. Years later, students and locals still talked about Lisa and Evan. Some claimed that, on misty evenings, they saw a faint figure walking near the woods behind the school. To this day, both cases remain unsolved, with locals wondering if the woods hide secrets they'll never uncover. In 1994, a gas station in rural Colorado became the center of a chilling mystery. It was a quiet, family-owned place, and Sam, a 22-year-old college student, worked the night shift there to make extra money. The station was never particularly busy at night, and most customers were regulars. But one evening, something strange happened that left the small community in shock. Around midnight, the security cameras recorded a car pulling into the station. The driver, wearing a hooded jacket, didn't get out right away. Instead, he sat there, staring toward the station's front window, though his face was obscured by shadows. Finally, he got out, but instead of heading for the gas pumps or entering the store, he simply stood by his car, looking inside at Sam. Sam noticed but thought maybe the man was having car trouble, so he opened the door and called out. The man didn't respond, just stared with an expression Sam couldn't quite read. Unnerved, Sam stepped back inside, locking the door. Minutes later, the man walked toward the door and stood just inches from the glass, looking in without saying a word. Sam, growing more anxious, turned his back to reach for the phone to call his manager. In the few seconds his back was turned, the man vanished, leaving his car in the lot. The next morning, when police came to investigate, they noticed something unusual. The security footage showed the man's car arriving, but it didn't show him leaving, and there was no record of his car in the lot. Sam's manager reviewed the tapes again and found something even more chilling, a faint image of the man standing behind Sam just before he locked the door, a moment Sam swore he was completely alone. Locals still talk about the story, and to this day, the gas station owner keeps the tape from that night, the only evidence of the customer who seemed to disappear into thin air. In 1943, in the small village of Wedge in Somerset, England, one of the most puzzling and eerie murders took place, one that still baffles criminologists and historians to this day. A young woman named Pamela Smith was found dead in her bedroom, which had been locked from the inside. There were no signs of struggle on her body, adding to the mystery. When the police began their investigation, they found the situation deeply strange. The doors and windows were locked from the inside, with no signs of forced entry. Pamela's body showed no signs of injury, no bruises, cuts, or anything that might suggest a struggle. However, the autopsy revealed that she had died of sudden cardiac arrest, though the reason remained unknown. The only odd detail that detectives noted was Pamela's expression. She lay with her eyes wide open and her mouth agape, as if something had scared her to death. Her face was frozen in an expression of pure terror. The room was in slight disarray, yet nothing had been stolen, and there was no evidence that anyone could have escaped through the windows or doors. Soon, rumors began to spread around the village. People claimed they could hear strange sounds coming from the room, quiet whispers, indistinct voices, and even footsteps as if someone was walking around. Those who had known Pamela said she often complained about strange occurrences. She felt a presence in the room, saw shadows at night, and heard someone calling her name. One of the detectives investigating the case was so intrigued that he decided to spend the night in Pamela's room. The next morning, he left the house, visibly shaken and refusing to speak about what had happened during the night. Shortly after, the police closed the case, listing Pamela's death as an accident or even natural causes. Since then, Pamela's room has remained locked, and the house has stood empty for years. It's said that anyone brave enough to enter hears the same sounds and feels the same fear that may have been Pamela's last emotion. Locals believe that her spirit is still trapped there, locked in the room, unable to find peace. In 1992, the Foster family moved into a charming old house in a small town in Pennsylvania. The house was everything they'd dreamed of, a spacious, Victorian-style home with plenty of character and a cozy feel. However, their excitement quickly turned to unease. Within a few weeks, strange things began to happen. The family would often get phone calls in the middle of the night, but when they answered, there would only be silence on the other end. Sometimes, they'd hear faint breathing or soft whispers, but they couldn't make out any words. These calls started coming almost every night, always around the same time, between 2 and 3 a.m. Mr. Foster initially dismissed it as a prank, maybe neighborhood kids or someone with the wrong number. But then things took a darker turn. One night, after another of these eerie calls, the family's oldest daughter, Emily, went to bed only to be woken by the feeling of someone sitting on her bed. When she opened her eyes, she saw nothing, but the feeling of a presence lingered. She was too terrified to scream, lying frozen until morning. The next day, Mrs. Foster decided to reach out to the previous homeowners, hoping for some kind of explanation. What they discovered was chilling. The previous owner, an elderly woman, had lost her husband unexpectedly in the house years before. She told them that he had died in his sleep but would often stay up late, sitting in his favorite armchair, right by the phone. He was known for making calls to his loved ones late at night, often just to hear their voices. His last call, she claimed, was made at exactly 2:30 a.m., the same time the Fosters received their calls every night. Determined to put an end to the unsettling disturbances, the Fosters decided to remove the old armchair that had belonged to the previous owner. That very night, the calls stopped. The Fosters lived peacefully in the house from then on, but every now and then, they say they could feel a strange, lingering presence near the phone. It was as if someone was still sitting there, waiting for a chance to reach out, a presence that left them feeling watched, even though the calls never came again.